Okay, let's just dive right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking something pretty fascinating. We're looking at dance coach Vladislav Knight's entirely holistic approach to surviving and honestly thriving during that incredibly stressful first competition. And hey, whether you're a competitive dancer yourself, maybe a coach guiding a team, or just someone who geeks out on the psychology of peak performance, you are going to get a lot out of this. This playbook is packed with actionable insights. We're going to see exactly how structured information combined with the right emotional support creates a truly resilient competitor. In the source material, Knight describes walking into a first competition as, quote, stepping onto a stage you've only seen from the back row. I mean, wow, that really hits the nail on the head, doesn't it? It perfectly captures just how daunting, unfamiliar, and, let's be real, absolutely terrifying it feels to suddenly be the one in the spotlight after you've spent months safely hidden away in a practice room. So that brings us to the big question for our explainer today. How do you prepare for the unknown? When the environment, the pressure, the stakes are all entirely new, how do you stop a student from just completely freezing up? Well, Knight argues that the real preparation happens way, way before event day, and we are going to break down his exact structured solution. So here's the 5-step playbook we're looking at today. 1. Redefining first competition success. 2. Building your practice plan. 3. Mastering the competition environment. 4. Turning nerves into tools. And 5. Feedback and holistic support. I promise, this is a highly logical step-by-step path from day 1 of practice, right up to the moment you step onto the floor. All right, let's kick things off with step 1, redefining first competition success, specifically looking at those first competition goals. Before we even think about physical drills, Knight says we need a major paradigm shift. Look, winning a trophy is what we call a podium finish goal. But if it's your first time out there, the judges' scores are basically completely out of your control. Obsessing over them, it's just a recipe for massive anxiety. So instead, we have to pivot to process goals. We're talking about things you can actually control, like consistency, staying calm, following the rules, or honestly, just completing a segment without stopping. The absolute key here is to nail down 2 or 3 of these controllable goals. Why? Because when students know their why, they stay motivated even when practice gets incredibly tough. They learn to compete against their own execution, not the rest of the room. Moving right along to step 2, building your practice plan. Let's look at this step-by-step roadmap for measurable training. You know, to keep training from feeling like you're climbing Mount Everest, Knight breaks preparation into 4 chronological stages. Step 1 is all about fundamentals, just getting super comfortable with the core routines. Then, in step 2, as the big day gets closer, he gradually cranks up the intensity. Step 3 is where things get really interesting. This is where he introduces realistic conditions. We're talking loud timers, scoring simulations, random scenario changes so the dancer has to adapt on the fly. And then step 4, which is scheduled recovery. The big takeaway, steady, stepped progress beats panicked, last-minute cramming every single time. Actually, let's zoom in on that final step for a second, achieving zero burnout. Knight is adamant that scheduled recovery is absolutely non-negotiable if you want peak performance. And he doesn't just mean resting your legs. He means taking actual, dedicated rest days entirely away from the studio. It also means doing short, reflective check-ins to make sure the student is doing okay emotionally. Because think about it, you literally cannot perform at your best if you're physically wrecked or mentally drained before you even walk through the venue doors. Okay, on to step 3, mastering the competition environment and learning how to adapt to the chaos. So often, we just assume competing is just doing the thing you practiced. But competitors actually face this huge wave of external shocks. Overwhelming noise levels, insane time pressure, trying to navigate these giant, unfamiliar spaces, not to mention the highly intimidating presence of other teams warming up right next to you. If your only practice happens in a quiet, safe studio, this sensory overload is going to completely derail you on the big day. It's inevitable. So, how do we bulletproof our students against that chaos? Well, Knight has a brilliant, simple solution. He says rehearse what to do when a timer starts, how to transition between rounds, and how to reset attention if something goes wrong. He literally runs mock arrival to performance scenarios. By rehearsing the boring logistics, walking into the room, waiting for your heat, dealing with a random interruption, students stay super grounded. They've already lived the chaos in practice, so the actual event feels totally manageable. That brings us to step 4, turning nerves into tools. Let's talk about channeling those emotions. Pretty much everyone feels this massive, crazy mix of high excitement and crippling anxiety right before performing. It's universal. But here is the secret. Don't eliminate those nerves. Channel them. There's this really common, almost toxic myth in performance training that you need to be completely zen, just erasing all your nerves to do well, but Knight points out that trying to push those feelings down almost always backfires. Instead, you just accept them. Nerves just mean you care. The real trick is using consistent pre-competition rituals to focus all that potent nervous energy directly into your performance. So let's walk through what channeling those nerves actually looks like, chronologically. In the minutes right before stepping out, the student does a brief physical warm-up followed by a short breathing routine just to steady their heart rate. Then they use specific positive self-talk. And in those absolute final terrifying moments, Knight tells his students to focus on just one next step, just the very first immediate physical action they need to take. This ties perfectly back to those controllable process goals we talked about earlier. By zeroing in on just one single action, it drastically cuts down the mental load and stops your brain from completely spinning out of control. Which seamlessly transitions us to our fifth and final pillar, feedback and holistic support. If you want long-term growth, you need a profound mindset shift. Mistakes are not personal failures, they're simply valuable pieces of information. This is such a brilliant coaching philosophy. When you teach students how to recover quickly and look at their setbacks purely analytically, well, errors stop feeling like these devastating personal attacks. Instead, they just become data. They become these highly educational moments that you use to plan the very next practice session. But how should a coach actually deliver that data? Listen, if you try to correct everything all at once the second a student steps off the floor, you are going to absolutely crush their spirit. You'll overwhelm them entirely. The master coach rule here is to pick just one fix for the next practice cycle. You keep evaluations highly specific and entirely actionable. And most importantly, Knight really emphasizes this. You have to teach students to give themselves credit for the things they improved on. Balancing that precision with encouragement is what makes the whole daunting task of skill building actually feel doable. Now, holistic support isn't just about the warm and fuzzy emotional stuff or technique. It is heavily logistical. We're talking about knowing exactly what to pack, meticulously planning your arrival times, having a backup plan for when the schedule inevitably changes, and making sure everyone knows their role and how to communicate. Think about it. If a student is totally scrambling in a panic on the morning of the event because they have no idea where to park, or they forgot their gear, their mental focus is completely destroyed before they've even tied their shoes. Handling these practical, behind-the-scenes details drastically lowers their baseline stress. And that brings us to the end of our explainer today. So I'll ask you, which of these playbook steps are you going to use for your next big challenge? Because, sure, we've been talking about Vladislav Knight's approach to competitive ballroom dance, but I really hope you can see how completely universal this framework is. Whether it's setting clear process goals, creating a step-by-step plan that avoids burnout, rehearsing for a chaotic environment, or just totally changing how you view your own mistakes, this kind of preparation creates an unbelievable foundation of confidence. And that's a foundation that's going to serve you well beyond just one single event. Take a second to think about how you might plug these concepts into your own life. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.